thank you so much for coming today, braving the weather. We really, really appreciate your time. And we're going to kick off now, if that's all right. Firstly, to welcome you in the room. Again, thank you for braving the weather, and welcome the people who are streaming online. We've got interpreters with us today. So if anyone online or in the room needs access to the interpreters, please kind of sit accordingly. And online you can pin the interpreters so you can see them more clearly. Just a bit of housekeeping from me. My name's Jenna Calfan and I'm the Director of Communications at the Trust. And we aren't expecting any fire alarms. If there is a fire alarm, it is real, and follow the fire exit signs. There are bathrooms just outside, should you need them. We're not intending to have breaks through the session, but there's snacks at the back, teas and coffees. Please feel free to go up and get some if you fancy it. I'm going to just move on to the agenda and explain what's going to happen today. So in a second, I'm going to introduce you to Anne, our chair, who is then going to introduce our executive, who are going to give a few presentations about the work that we've done over the last year. And then we're going to move into a panel session about prevention and early support. And then we hope to close the meeting at 7:30. There'll be a couple of opportunities to ask questions. Some will be pre-submitted questions that you guys submitted online. And then the final Q&A will be for anybody in the room to ask a question. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Anne, our chair.
Thank you very much, Jenna. I'll sit down because if I don't, I'm going to block the screen, which obviously, even though I'm not very big, and you can probably barely see me at the back, but I will sit. So thank you very much, Jenna, and welcome everybody to our annual public meeting for 2023. It's really lovely to actually be able to meet in person again after the pandemic. So as Jenna says, I'm Anne Beasley. I'm chair of South West London and St George's, and I will attempt to be your host for this evening. So it's fantastic to welcome you to the transformed Springfield Hospital. It's actually, I know a number of you have been on some tours, and it is absolutely lovely, isn't it? So really great to welcome you here. And really great when we opened the Springfield Village in July. It was a real step forward, I think, for our trust. So lots of change with lots of new buildings and so on, but it's also been a real change in our society with inflation, cost of living, which all has a knock-on effect on individuals' mental health and well-being in our different communities. And in this context, I would draw your attention to the support available through our services and the amazing work of many of our partners that has shown itself to be more valuable than ever. So please ask about that if you want to. It's been 3 years since the death of George Floyd sparked a global movement for change, and our work here to become an anti-racist organisation and to tackle injustice and discrimination within our health system continues with energy and determination, but we know that there is still so much more to do. It's been a year where our teams have gone above and beyond to support our patients and each other, and that's included supporting colleagues' right to strike or not to strike through the ongoing period of industrial action. As communities, we continue the long-term healing process in the wake of the pandemic. And though it seems sometimes quite a long time ago, we know that for many people, they continue to feel the effects in their day-to-day lives, be that the loss of a loved one or a long-term health condition. It's been a landmark year for the NHS, 75 years of universal healthcare, and the remembering of the leaders and the millions of people who through their public service have built this fantastic organisation up over the decades. And it was great to welcome many of you to our street parties in July. It actually rained a bit on that day, didn't it? Every time I spoke, it rained. So there's a sort of correlation there. But transformation has continued across many of our services at pace, with our expanded community mental health services. And as you can see around you, this fantastic new estate, which is the first of a number of developments, so more ahead. We look forward in next year or so to the opening, well, next month actually, to the opening of the new Shaftesbury building, which, if I'm right, is that way. I think I've got my orientation right. So we'll be opening that next month, and then the redevelopment of Barnes and Tolworth hospitals in Richmond and Kingston, respectively, over the next few years. So as Jenna said, we've got a packed agenda tonight with updates from our executive team, with Q&A sessions and a panel discussion. So without further ado, I will hand you over to our Chief Executive, Vanessa, to get us underway with a summary of the year. And I think I'll hand you the mic.
Okay, I think that's working. Okay, so hello everyone, my name's Vanessa Ford, and I'm honoured to serve our community, a community and a trust that has been part of my life since I was 18 years old, so only a few years, but maybe more like 26. Anyway, this is my fourth annual general meeting as the Chief Executive, and every year I feel even more proud, but also suitably nervous and suitably responsible for the accountability that I take with my executive team for delivering to the communities that we serve and we hold in our highest regard. I remain humbled and thankful for the generosity, compassion of our patients, our carers, the families, and the wider community. And of course, my thanks and extends to our amazing staff, because we are no one without our staff. The world around us is not an easy one, if anyone's missed it. The weather is only a very small part of our challenge, and yet weather seems to be the easiest thing in many ways to talk about. But in mental health services, we see and share the very hardest and most vulnerable parts of our society. They get magnified in mental health services in terms of the need, the demand, and the complexity of how people are presenting and their experience. Cost of living impacts us all, and if you have a mental health condition, that again is magnified. The meaning of home, the meaning of meaningful employment, the ability to eat, the ability to care for each other is all affected by cost of living around us. We also have a significant backdrop in terms of our staffing challenges. This challenge is shared across the health and social care sector. Financial pressures exist in the NHS, exist in the wider social systems. And then there's something more soft, but also exceptionally important in terms of the relationships that we have with each other and the trust that we hold across each other. And that's ever more present and demonstrated through events like the Countess of Chester, the Letby, okay, and our approach to industrial action. And the decision to delay the Mental Health Act reform is not a small one. It doesn't talk to the parity of esteem, and many of our service users and carers and our staff have very strong feelings about the need to reform and the decision and the impact of that delay. And the ever more present health inequalities and racisms that exist within our society. You have to ask yourself the question, and I have, would our response, or the trust response to Letby, have been different if she were a person of colour? Locally, we are lucky. We have strong relationships, strong partnerships, and it's key that good relationships with healthy challenge, a shared ownership of our responsibility for people with mental health and physical health conditions, and a clear understanding of the data. So we've gone to the next slide, so. Skip back, that's it. So I've talked a bit about the opportunities that partnerships give us. That's one back. That's it. Perfect, thank you. So ultimately, my job as a chief executive and our job as a unitary board is to balance our finances with the quality, with access, so patients' journey and equity of access, and our people, our staff's well-being, with an ever magnified lens on health inequalities. We have great foundations to do this from. We have a good CQC rating. We have the amazing new hospital that you're all sat in, which I have to say, you've got to be impressed when you walk in. It's like it breaks down the stigma. Yeah. We've got the commitment of our ICS to have a joint South West London mental health strategy and cross-sector commitment to investment and support, to tackling mental health out of being the Cinderella service that it once was into being everybody's business. And with that comes a challenge that everybody wants to try and fix it. And it's not an easy thing to fix, it's complex. And again, here is where our people, our patients and communities with their diversity and richness gives us the energy around co-production. They are our biggest assets. With the work such as the Ethnicity Mental Health Improvement Programme front and centre, and Billy's going to speak later around that. So it wouldn't be an annual general meeting if I didn't give you some facts and stats, and the facts and stats come from our annual report. Then that's it. So we serve a stonking population of 1.2 million, and our population is hugely diverse in terms of protected characteristic, social deprivation, and need, both express need and unmet need. We have over 2,500 staff, 52% of whom are from Black and ethnic minority communities. And we have seen a 13% increase in staff in higher banded leadership positions for Black and ethnic minority communities. I'm really proud of that. And yet we still have significantly more to do. Last year, we made over 400,000 individual contacts with 46,000 referrals to secondary care, and yet only 1,600 odd people were admitted to our inpatient services, demonstrating yet again that the vast majority of our care is provided in the least restrictive environments and as close to home as possible. And yet, when you need urgent and acute care in mental health, you really need urgent and acute care. And the pressure that you feel when you can't access that is very significant. And we know we still have a challenge with demand. And I have a responsibility to be honest with you about that, which is why our transformation is making the biggest difference. Not just our new buildings, but not just our new buildings, which by interest, so just this building alone has led to a 36% reduction in patient and staff safety incidents. That means that people are more likely to get discharged without having had a patient safety incident. And if anybody who's been in our inpatient service, that's a big deal. Yes. We have continued our commitment in a real and felt way towards our anti-racism, and Anne has spoken a little bit about that already. We're very clear that we have a language to talk about this now and openness to have those conversations. And we're also very clear, as colleagues in this room will regularly tell me, that talking is not enough. So we have taken action to address this. And in our talking therapy services, the proportion of people from Black and ethnic minority communities who are moving into recovery is now in line with white people. But most importantly, our access to talking therapies is now in line for people from black and ethnic minority communities is now in line with our white communities, with a 10% increase in access. So it shows that we're doing more than just talking about it. We are making a difference, but I'm not saying that we should by any way, shape or means stop there, because we know that we still have an issue with that black individuals from black and ethnic minority communities are still more likely to be detained, restrained and have poorer outcomes. And our staff are less likely to experience fair career progression. We know it's not okay, but I'm clear that the actions we are taking and our continued commitment to this are seeing a stepped change. We have progressed in a meaningful way against each of our strategic objectives. In relation to increasing quality years, our community transformation programme in particular in Sutton and Kingston and Richmond is already seeing the right, I hate the word green shoots, but I can't think of another one, but the right movement, yeah? It's making a difference. It's improving staff retention, it's improving patient outcome, it's improving access. And we've got the same to follow in Merton and Wandsworth. We've improved our CQC ratings in 2 of our services, and Sharon's going to talk to you a little bit more about that. In connection to reducing health inequalities, I've spoken about that throughout my presentation today, but if we think about our ethnicity mental health improvement programme, we've got our first host family hosting something the first time. We're leading the way in some of this work. In connection to making the trust a great place to work, we know that happy staff effectively provide happy care. We have an exec advisory group that we've established this year to increase the diversity in people making decisions. Alongside that, our street party had a dual purpose, not just to celebrating as a trust, but inviting our communities to celebrate with us. And then there's our sustainability. So we're going to hear later about our mental health strategy, which Amy's going to support us with. Philip is going to do an able job of talking about the money, so I shan't steal his thunder. And I think we've talked about the transformation. The transformation that we're sat in today, when you look at it, it's more than the hospital buildings. It's the creation of a village, the creation of a new park and a space where people come to and play, with anti-stigma at its core. As I was walking in this morning, I walked in with somebody who was coming to use our services, and 3 of the people on his way in had already spoken to him about where are you going, how are you today, and these were members of the general public who ordinarily would not have been in contact in the same way. It matters that people feel comfortable, and our role as an anchor is developing in a felt and thought through way. And it's through our partnerships and in collaboration that we have achieved all that. So I'm sat here today saying we've made a strong start, but you have my commitment that it's a start and that we're not going to stop doing what we've already started. So leading into next year, so what are we going to do? What's our cunning plan? Well, none of it's going to be easy because the context around us isn't easy. But actually, we have a clear set of priorities set against our strategic ambitions. But we have 2 top priorities, which we believe are going to make the biggest difference to shifting the dial. That's the continued creation of a valued and stable workforce, because it matters if you're care coordinated in our services, that you have somebody that knows you and you're not repeatedly telling your story. And because it matters if you're a member of staff that you're working alongside colleagues who value you. Alongside that, an improved patient journey, referred to in the acute sector as flow, but I think we have people on a journey to recovery here, so that people get help that they need when they need it. It sounds simple, but it's going to be, we know it's going to be complex, and we have plans in place to deliver that. And one of our key plans is that of creating our Better Communities approach to transforming care. Anne spoke to you about the successful move into this building, and I'll move next week, 2 weeks time. Don't panic. It's okay, we're not bringing it forward into Shaftesbury. And transforming our environment. We've achieved so much already. We've got a foundation to build on, but it's the co-production, transforming our services, that is going to lead to the real success of our of delivery. So that's it from me. My job now is to pass you to Philip, who's got 5 minutes to tell you about that's
Well, there's a challenge which I probably won't live up to. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Philip Murray. I'm the Director of Finance and also the Deputy Chief Executive. It is, as always, a pleasure and privilege to be sat here before you, serving this trust and the people which we provide the great services that we do. And it's also a privilege to be able to present this year's financial result. Unlike today's weather, finance can be rather dry. So I will try and keep it brief, because I know you'd rather be hearing from our Director of University, Medical Director, and of course the panel discussion shortly. So we only in inverted commas, have 5 targets to hit. It seems a mountain sometimes. And you'll see from that slide that we met them all. I won't take you through the slide, you can read it and you'll see it in our annual report. I would just mention 2 items. One that you probably find a little bit unusual, particularly those that look at private sector accounts. One's called external financing limit. And that's a target set of us by the government, which represents the amount of resource that we can invest in our capital infrastructure. So in our case, our estates modernisation programme. And I'll show you a little bit later how much we have invested in that. And I would like to mention the last one there, the prompt payment. Vanessa had already mentioned the cost of living crisis. And that equally applies to businesses, be they big or small. So it's really fundamentally important that we do pay our invoices quickly, so that those that supply the goods and services without which we wouldn't survive can themselves survive. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to do that. There's a number missing from the middle of my disc. So I'm lucky I can remember the number. So how much income have we actually received in the last financial year? It's £275 million. Vanessa did put that up on her slide. And as you can see, about 95% of that comes from our direct provision of care to the public, to you, the public. How does that compare to last year? Well, actually, we've grown in size as a trust by about £30 million year on year. So we are providing more services, we are growing as mental health, and we are trying, with the funds available, to expand our services to meet that demand that's growing, as Vanessa said. It's a slight delay. So where did we spend that money? Well, this is a very simple slide, but a couple will break it down a little bit more. But as you can see, the majority of our money expenditure is spent on pay. And of course, as Vanessa said, it's those highly professional, highly skilled and highly dedicated staff in which that money goes on that enables us to provide brilliant services that we do provide. So it's really fundamentally important. And you'll see that a higher proportion of our spend, probably you're seeing, and the Physical Health Trust does go on pay. They are the lifeblood of our business. It is a people business. The rest, as you can see, is on non-pay areas and a small amount on capital costs. So breaking that down a little bit further, you can see here on the slide where we actually spend money when we're talking about our staff. The majority of it, the vast majority, goes on direct clinical staff. But what we mustn't forget is that every member of staff that we employ, regardless of the job they do, has an active role, and they play that role in helping to deliver the care that we do successfully deliver every day. Without all of those individuals, we would not be able to do what we do for our population. This is always a slightly interesting slide, so people can relate to percentages. So you can see here that 80% of our costs, slightly more than last year, are spent on directly on clinical staff. and the clinical costs that surround those staff, drugs, etc. 11% on the buildings, without which we couldn't deliver that care. And you'll see that a small amount, 9%, the same as last year, is spent on the management infrastructure that enables us to support the business and keep the business going. And our business, of course, is healthcare and mental health. You'll be pleased to know 2 slides probably haven't quite attained the timing, but I'm nearly there, I think. So we've spent considerable amount of money this year on our estate. As Vanessa said, you're sat in some of it now. Those of you that live locally, you'll have seen it develop. You'll have seen the buildings and the houses and the park go up. And every day I walk through the park, and every day there's more people in there enjoying that space. You see that we've spent just shy of £22 million on modernising our fabric, and the largest chunk of that for these 2 buildings that you can see. We, of course, recognise that we do have other buildings, and we spend £3 million on maintaining those and improving them in many cases. And of course, as you'd expect, a small investment in digital infrastructure. And of course, we recognise that it's digital that enables many of the transformations and the different approaches to healthcare that are now opening up to us. So it's really important that we do invest in digitally. And lastly, I won't talk to this slide. It really reiterates the pressures that Vanessa put up in her slide and how they continue to relate, or equally relate, I should say, to the financial picture and the financial outlook which the trust faces now and in the future. Thank you for your attention, and I will pass you over to Sharon.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Sharon Spain, and I am the Director of Nursing and Quality. And I'm really, really proud to be able to present you back with some of the achievements that we've made this year, quality, patient care, and improving that. I think it's really important. So you've seen our CQC good, overall rating of good. So over a year ago, more than a year ago, we were in requires improvement for 2 of our services, around our eating disorders and our rehabilitation services. So for us to improve that, we were really disappointed, obviously, around that. What we did is we looked at improving the very basics of the care that we provide to our patients, and not getting caught up in some of the overly complicated stuff. So we developed 11 fundamental standards of care, which really are just getting back to the basics of care. The teams and the clinical teams really were very engaged with this. The patients were really engaged with it, got lots of co-production. And all of our frontline staff worked incredibly hard, worked through it, and CQC came back to re-rate us and re-rated us as good, and really recognised that actually getting back to basics is what's most important to our patients, and not overcomplicating the quality of care that we provide to our patients. Alongside that, we have massively improved our physical health care for our patients, recognising around the parity of staying. This is an area we haven't always got right in mental health, and I don't think we're alone with that either. So we have developed a physical health framework, which has been supported through our ICB colleagues as well. So I'm going to move us on to our key priorities. Basically, the key priorities that we had for 22-23, they were around our safety, emotion, physical health, our patient experience, and patient choice of medication, suicide prevention. So these are all really key, and actually they're really important. The progress that we've made in these has been significant, and the feedback we're getting from our patients and our carers has been really positive. We have a lot more to do, and I think we recognise the importance of these 5 areas, and we want to continue to enhance those and improve those. So we've chosen to continue with those and with stronger plans with that going forward. One of the other areas that we are going to focus on is the changes that are in our CPA approach, which is to move away from having care coordinators. There's a lot of complexity around it. And what we want to do is get really back to holistic care planning and safety planning for our patients that incorporates everything. And it's just really clear and really simple, and it's a real just an understanding of what we actually offer and what your care will look like going forward. So there are a lot more quality aspects, and Billy's going to talk about the health inequalities and some other aspects. But we are going to pass on to showing a short video, I think, at the moment around our suicide prevention and the work that some of our volunteers have done with our ICB. Really, it's really brave and actually exciting.
Suicide shouldn't be a taboo subject anymore because it's killing people. The reason why I joined this project is because I wanted to be less ashamed of being suicidal. The way that we save lives is by talking about what makes us anxious, what we fear, so we can get the right support. So our family and friends and professionals will be less scared talking about the subject. That's what saves people.
It really struck a chord because I'm a survivor of suicide and we bear the scars, don't we? And the whole project has been really exciting. I mean, it's amazing what we've achieved together. And I'm really proud of it. It's been really exciting. I mean, it's amazing what we've achieved together. And I'm really proud of it.
Thanks, Sharon. And lovely to meet you all. My name's, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Billy Boland. I'm the medical director for the Trust. And I have the responsibility around health inequalities. I'm also a psychiatrist, a community psychiatrist, and I still see patients today. And one day I work out in the Madison Centre, which is over in Twickenham, which I still see it's a really important part of my job to be in touch with clinical practice and see patients, and I love that. I also love working at an organisation that prioritises trying to reduce health inequalities. So as far back as 2018, we put reducing health inequalities as one of our priorities as an organisation. So it's one of our key, and we've got 4 strategic areas that we focus upon, and reducing health inequalities is one of those areas. So we've been trying to make a difference for a long time, but it's hard. It's really hard. So why is it hard? Well, inequalities exist in society, and they've existed in society for such a long period of time. Some of us have more power and privilege than others, and it's the way that it's been. Doesn't mean that it's right, but it's the way that it's been. And we have a responsibility as an NHS organisation to try and redress that balance and give people that have disadvantage, find it more difficult to access care, get benefits out of care, to try and level that up and to make it equal for everybody. So we know in wider society, and that includes our organisation as well, it includes us as a mental health trust, structural racism still exists, so it's there within our organisations. We know, for example, that Black people trust our organisation and trust mental health services less than the wider community because of historic injustices and how Black people have been treated within mental health services and broader institutions in the past. And that's a fact, right? We've also had increased demand for services, and that can lead to inequalities. Some areas of society getting more access than others. So we know, Vanessa was telling you that only a minority of patients actually come into our patient lines, right? Mostly we're successful at treating people in the community, keeping people at home, keeping people near their loved ones. But sadly, we still have an overrepresentation of Black, Asian and minority ethnic people that come into our inpatient wards. They're more likely to be admitted. And that suggests to us that we're still not as good at treating people early and keeping people out of hospital from those communities. And we recognise we need to get better at that. And then there's the cost of living crisis, right? So that affects society, but we know that people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities tend to be more disadvantaged economically. So when we're challenged as a society, it will unequally affect different parts of society. So these are the challenges that we're up against. So we as our organisation are trying to do what we can to address that balance. So here's some smiling faces for you. These are a couple of Philip was saying that we spend the majority of our money on staff, and quite rightly so. They're the people that make a difference. Our patients, aren't they? And these are two of our stars, our staff stars. So Kurt, I can see online. I'm sure that's twice you've seen your face up on the slides already. Kurt. He's a nurse and a leader within our community services, a psychotherapist. And then you've got Paige Uraji, a consultant psychiatrist specialising in working with people with intellectual disability. And you might have seen these here, you might have seen them on social media, and you might have seen them at the bus stop in Tooting Harbour as well. Right? And Paige says to me she's got countless photos of people taking a selfie with her. Fame at last. So we're trying to build trust essentially within our community and show Black people and others that we're here for them. There's people that look like them, and we want to work with the Black community. And then strategically, we have these three themes. We developed a health inequalities and equality, diversity and inclusion plan. On the back of our strategy, these are the broad aims. It's a bit kind of board reporting and dry, but the idea is that we are trying to embed how we deal with inequalities within our structures and processes, how we run meetings, how we look at data. But we only know if our services are unequally provided if we're actually looking at it and counting it and seeing who benefits and who doesn't from our services. We're trying to do specific interventions and target interventions of particular communities in order to encourage people to take up our services and develop new services. That's the yellow bit there. And you heard Vanessa talk about MHIP. And then it's about embedding it in everything that we do in the future, working with our community and making sure that we retain that strategic focus. Yeah, and then in the future, as Vanessa said, we're not giving up, right? So we've made a start, and we're making a difference. We're not just doing actions. We're not just doing things like putting faces on bus stops. You've heard some data today where we're actually having an impact, and that's great. But it's not sorted, you know. We hope that by getting more people into psychological therapy services, talking therapy services, working with communities, we can do some of that preventative work with our community. But it's not yet playing through to the people that are coming into our wards. So there's more to do. We know that Black, Asian and minority ethnic people are more likely to be subject to restrictive practices. Black people are more likely to be on a community treatment order. So we've still got work to do, but we're keeping at it. I think that's everything I wanted to say, and I'm going to hand you back to Anna.
Is this still on? Yes, it is now. So thank you very much, Vanessa, Philip, Sharon and Billy. Hopefully that's given you a flavour of what matters to us as a trust, what our priorities are. There's so much that goes on in a year. You can't go through all of it. Well, you'd be here a very long time if we did at the annual meeting, but hopefully that's given you a sense of what we've achieved and what more there is to do. We're now going to move into the first of two question and answer sessions, as Jenna said earlier, that we've got this evening. The first session is with questions that have been pre-submitted. You will get a chance to ask questions from the floor in the second session after the panel discussion later. So if I'll tell you what, I will alert the person who's going to answer the question, and then I'll read the question out to give them a sporting chance to be ready. So the first question is for Ian Garlington, and the question is, what innovations do you need to make to drive up outcomes and reduce inequalities, and what are the barriers to this? If you could be relatively brief,
One of my main qualities, Chair, thank you. You've already heard an awful lot of the answers to this from both Billy's presentation around health inequalities and also in Vanessa's summary around what we're doing in terms of transforming both our environments and our services. Let me try and put a little bit more flavour on what you've already heard. So the transformation programme, our Better Communities programme that I head up for, it touches most parts of Trust Life all the way through. We've already been investing, and the NHS long-term plan tells us the direction to invest in that. We know that the results, if we invest in services that are delivered in our communities, closer to people's homes, that we get better outcomes for people on the way through. And in Vanessa's presentation, you heard some of the stats that support how that cuts up through our services and the interactions we have with people. But as we also know that when we provide great environments, again, like Trinity, you're sitting in now, we've seen benefits from outcomes for our patients on our wards, and that evidence is only building and building as we start to get more used to working in environments. And actually, for all the things that our colleagues plan to do through all the years of planning to bring us to this point, we're only now realising actually what we have and how much more benefit we can make as a consequence of working from them. So we're constantly refining, constantly improving the way that we deliver our patient services. And the other thing that I wanted to make you aware of is that as much as you've heard an awful lot this evening about how we're working hard to deliver better services that you would expect us to do, what I also want to highlight to you is the fact that we're becoming notorious, both nationally and internationally, for the things you wouldn't expect us to do around mental health prevention work, about how building new homes that support people to stay within their communities actually creates an overall tapestry that allows people to remain well against all the adversities of mental ill health and actually supporting our wellness agenda. We're super proud of the Heart, for example, and how that can support us as a skilled escalator for allowing people to come forward in jobs that remain in their community, and how we own that part and take it forward, how it promotes physical well-being. We know how great that is after the pandemic of getting into those spaces. But also we know that if we can release land to build homes that are both affordable, of the correct size and the type of way that people want to live, that allows them to stay within their communities, that significantly promotes the well-being of that overall community. It keeps that cohesion together. And our role in doing that, you wouldn't necessarily think is important to us, but it's actually really rather key. And we're now being seen as a model for how all England and wider should actually look at how they put mental health and mental wellness in the heart of the community with really important. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Bring the mic away from me.
I was going to say, I was going to give you the wink that said go and tackle him to the floor. That was great. Thank you very much, Ian. So the next question is for Catherine. And the question is, what is happening to tackle challenges across recruitment and retention to prevent staff shortages? Thanks, Catherine.
Hi everyone. So I think it's no secret that nationally there are challenges around recruitment and retention in the NHS. And although we work nationally with our partners across the NHS to look at ways to manage that or improve that in the longer term, we talked today about building trust in our community. Billy's talked about that. And actually, I think that that is where our priority lies. We know that there are many people in the community who want to work in these amazing facilities within this amazing organisation, but often find it really difficult to navigate what is quite a complex process. We hear that from our partners all the time. So our priority needs to be around how we're working with partners across different sectors in our community to make that easier, because we have so much to offer. Not only do we have some amazing services, but we also have apprenticeships. We have to do more around our apprenticeships and building people's career path with us. Meaning that they can have a really good and rewarding career in this organisation, which obviously we want to do in order for us to be able to provide our great services. So there is lots to do. It's a big challenge, but we are quite excited about the opportunity we've got if we can do things slightly differently locally.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So our next question is for Amy. And the question is, what improvements are happening to support children and young people? Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. I feel slightly fraudulent answering this because our clinical director for family services is sat here watching me. So thank you very much. I guess that first of all, I'd say that children and young people's mental health is a priority nationally, at system level and locally. And actually, we're really, really fortunate within the trust. We have some excellent CAMHS services who focus not just on treatment and support for children and people and their families, but also on some early support and prevention work, most notably within some of our schools and our mental health support teams. We're also really fortunate that our new South West London mental health strategy includes a core element around children and young people's mental health. And in this financial year that we're now in, 23-24, we've got programmes of work that are looking at improving pathways, improving access and improving outcomes and experience. That's all really, really positive work. Every year, we work with our commissioning colleagues at the South West London Integrated Care Board, and we start to think about where we need to invest additional resources. And we've got commitments. Over the last couple of years, we've invested more money into children and young people services. So I think in Kingston and Richmond, we invested about £1.4 million in additional funds over the last couple of years. So that funding really helps us to bring down any backlog, any really long waits that families are experiencing. We'll continue to work with colleagues to invest more where possible. And I think finally, I'd just say we've got a really, really interesting and innovative, if you will, CAMHS transformation programme, again, led by Joel and colleagues. They're on CAMHS service lines. That helps us think internally about what we can do differently and how we can make changes.
Thank you very much, Amy. So the next question is for Billy, and you've already spoken a little bit about this, but the question is, we know that historically and today, people from ethnic minorities face challenges engaging with mental health services. What is the Trust doing to change this?
Yes, so building trust is key, as I was mentioning earlier. You've heard about some of the specific services that we are developing, just to highlight it kind of top level, but just we can't, just wanted to say we can't do that on our own, right? So we as an organisation need to work in partnership with others. And there's so many people in this room that have contributed to our health inequalities work. So just to talk a little about the MHIP work, for example, we've got colleagues here, supporters here like Malik and Martin and Natalie at the back there, Tom at the back, working with our partners. So not just our trust, working with the Wandsworth Community Empowerment Network, the Integrated Care System. That's what we need to do, develop our new services. So one of the MHIP hubs, the Wellbeing Hub at New Testament Assembly Church, just down the road, popped in there earlier, got given a cup of tea. It is a new space, right? It's a new way for us to be able to engage with the Black community, get them to see that we're willing to come out of our own old Victorian institutions, go into Black spaces and talk about mental health and demonstrate that we want to work with people. But there's also about working with communities in this brand new building. So we want this brand new building not just to be for us, the staff, it's for everybody in our community. I was really delighted when Malik held the Black Minds Matter Summer School here. In the summer, we had Black young people come in for 5 days talking about mental health, meeting our staff, hearing their stories and their disadvantage and how they've been treated by mental health services in the past. So there's no one thing that we can do to reduce health inequalities. It's all of these little steps that add up.
Thanks very much, Billy. And I was fortunate to go to the closing session of the summer school, which was actually truly inspirational. So it was a great event. So the next question, Sharon, is for you. And the question is, can you tell us more about the Trust's work to support carers, how the Trust is building on this moving forward, and how the public and patients can get more involved in the Trust's work?
Okay, thank you. And equally, I feel fortunate. I've got Helen, who's our head of therapies and has done a huge amount of excellent work with her team on corporate carers and people with lived experience. So we might have to chip in, Helen. But we recognise how absolutely vital it is for us to work so closely with our carers. And we have co-production and involvement team, which has worked really hard to grow over the last couple of years. And they have provided some brilliant feedback and really been involved in our co-production. So any changes that we want to make, any ideas we've got around improving services, we need our carers, people with lived experience to really help us to lead on those pieces of work. We have carers on, we try to have carers on nearly all of our committees and where we can, and actually their feedback when we're going through some of our kind of, as Billy said, the kind of dull board kind of papers. It's really healthy to have that fresh lens on it and actually some of those really good challenging questions. We have just achieved our membership with Triangle of Care, which is a great achievement. That means 100% of our services have been self-assessed and have done really, really well and really improved. I think one of the areas that we can still work on is our communication, and I think we're very much aware of how we communicate with carers and how we get feedback and how we really take feedback from carers to make sure we're providing the right care for our patients.
Thank you, Sharon, and I absolutely agree that having carers on some of our committees makes a real difference, doesn't it, to the quality of our decision making. Jen, the next question is for you. A really important question. Does the Trust have an accident and emergency service for mental health so patients don't have to go to traditional A&E departments?
Thanks, Anne. I'm Jen Allen, the Chief Operating Officer. So I think, first of all, it's important to acknowledge that we continue to see a rise in demand for crisis mental health services in line with the demand that we see across our services. And we want to help people to get care in the right place first time. But at the same time, it's important to acknowledge that if people do have a physical health need, and those mental health needs should not be precluded from being cared for in an A&E. And we work really hard in partnership with our emergency department colleagues to make sure that environment and the care that we give to people who do need to be in an A&E department but have mental health challenges is as appropriate and dignified and respectful as it can be. And we also work really hard in partnership with them to make sure that we direct people to the most appropriate setting as soon as we can. So to one of our kind of specialist mental health crisis services, which can give the most appropriate care. So the first port of call for that is our mental health crisis line. That's part of our Coral Crisis Hub. And that can give 24/7 support to someone in mental health crisis and can be accessed either as a diversion from an A&E setting or directly. And then we can also provide face-to-face or video assessment for people who want further support with their mental health on an urgent basis through our Coral service. And we can make onward referrals as well and support people to be looked after in short stay psychiatric decision unit, our Lotus unit, or to be supported longer term by our mental health services. So we do have quite a robust pathway in place for people to access directly who need mental health support. I just also want to mention that it's really important that we think about supporting people in the community and helping to prevent people from needing to access emergency services and keep them well. So we really work closely with our community transformation, our community colleagues, and we've initiated a new service called the Enhanced Response Team, where we're trying to work with service users who might need additional support to stay well. And to support them with different kinds of interventions, like using our voluntary community sector partners and the crisis cafes to help people to remain in receiving the care they need before they reach crisis point. So we don't have a mental health A&E per se, but we have a whole range of services that we're constantly working to enhance to try and get people the right care that they need for their mental health crisis as soon as possible.
Thank you, Jen, for that very clear explanation. And the last question in this Q&A session is for Vanessa, which I think builds on remarks you made earlier. And the question is, there are economic challenges across society at the moment. How does the Trust continue to ensure it delivers high quality care and improvements in this context?
So I'm hoping that I could answer that in the presentation. But I suppose what I would add to the presentation is I think we have a really tough job in the NHS to make a fair balance of quality, finance, access, and support to our staff. And in order to deliver in the economic situation that we're in, I think making sure that mental health is front and centre of our integrated care systems priority, and not just the board, but also the partnership board has been critical to the work we're doing. So actually, we've made ourselves fairly irritating at the place and at Borough. We've made ourselves fairly indispensable in those settings because we believe that that's the best way to ensure that people get the best care by making sure that it's everybody's business and not necessarily the mental health trust business. We just facilitate it.
Thank you, Vanessa. So that's the last question in this session, but as I said, there is an opportunity later in this evening to take some questions from the floor. And as you will see, my colleagues are seamlessly whipping off the name tags because we're now about to move into the second session of the evening. And I was going to suggest that the new panel, we will exit stage right or left, whichever, left and right. And if the new panel join us, and then I will hand over to Amy Scammell, who is going to introduce the next session. So give us a few minutes to sort ourselves out.
We don't think maybe. What we I see.
On there. Wonderful. I see some colleagues have taken the opportunity to get us now. Very good. I can see you there, Philip, snatching away. Thank you very much, Anne. Really nice to see you all this evening. My name is Amy Scammell. I am the Trust Director of Strategy and Transformation. And in the second part of our evening, we're going to think a little bit about partnership working and prevention and early support. And I'm effectively just going to give us a tiny little overview for just a few minutes of some of the partnership work we've been doing around our South West London mental health strategy with colleagues across our integrated care system. And then I'm going to hand over to my right seamlessly to my colleague, Charlotte Ofwafi, who is one of our non-exec directors. And Charlotte, I think you're going to chair a panel session and discussion around prevention and early support. Lovely. Okay, all good. So Jen, you'll pop the slides up for me. Thank you so much. So 5 years ago, I launched our trust strategy, not in this room, in a room that we no longer use across the way. But at that point, the landscape in the NHS looked really different. It couldn't, in fact, be more different, probably. So last year, we ended up with the implementation of the Health and Care Act. And within that act, it really placed on the NHS a duty to work in partnership and collaboration. I wanted to tell you a little bit about some collaborative work that we've done with partners over the last 18 months. And it's another strategy. And whilst I remain really proud of the work we did in 2018 on our trust strategy, I think this is a step change again. So earlier in 2022, our ICB colleagues, our Integrated Care Board colleagues, commissioned a new mental health strategy for South West London. And what we've done over the last year is we've worked really hard and in partnership with colleagues to develop that work. We've heard from many people across our system, nearly 1,000 people. We've talked to stakeholders who work in different areas of health and care. And we've completed a large amounts of data analysis and interrogation to understand some of our population health needs and some of our challenges. Our strategy will run for 5 years. It runs from 2023 onwards, and it includes a whole range of different elements, including a vision, key priorities, one of which is children and young people's mental health, and also focuses very much on how we deliver this work in collaborative practice. So we can't do this alone. We need to work in partnership, and it's enormously important. The strategy focuses as much on prevention and early support as it does on treatment and care for people who are unwell or experiencing challenges. And so really, we need to think about our role as the trust, about how we step forward into that space. How do we work more effectively with partners? How do we take sometimes a
a back seat and allow colleagues working in the voluntary and community sector to lead work that we know that they are best placed to move forward. In the first year of our strategy, we've got some collective work to move forward to think about how do we step into this space, what foundational work do we need to do, and how do we prepare to work in the new world. Sorry, slight delay in slides, the ones that I can see, not the ones that you can see. The engagement work that we carried out told us things that I think many of you will recognise, and in some cases those were hard things to hear, actually. So primarily, I think waiting times are too long. People feel frustrated and unsupported at times when they wait for services, and that's a massive challenge. We know that more community support is needed earlier in our pathway to help people stay well and to help people recover and support themselves with self-care. We know that actually across the health and care sector, we can work more effectively together. We often get tied up working in siloed ways. We don't necessarily communicate and articulate, share information in the way that we ought to. Another major issue that came out for us was that people are still experiencing quite significant levels of stigma and shame when coming forward to talk about mental health challenges or mental health conditions. And that's something that we need to work in partnership to resolve and to tackle. And I think, again, people find it quite complicated to understand how to access support. It can be very overwhelming to know what to access when and how services might work and how they might support you. So again, through all this engagement, we did this in partnership. We heard the things that were really, really important to people. And then I just want to tell you on the last slide, I think, just a few little bits about the content. So we've developed a vision. It's quite wordy. I won't read it to you. I'll let you read it at your leisure later on. But actually, it really tries to operate as a vision for anyone that lives, works and studies in South West London. So this is a broad strategy which focuses on emotional well-being, resilience, mental health. And we have developed 4 themes to guide our work. And that really helps us to structure the work that we do. You can see these up here on the slides. Prevention, early support, what we tonically call maybe a biopsychosocial model. So basically working together across health and care, thinking about physical health care, mental health care, social care. And it's that first theme, prevention and early support, that we want to explore a little bit more with colleagues sat up here with me this evening. So I think I'm going to pass to Charlotte to introduce the panel, and I shall give you up an extra space.
Thank you very much, Amy. Just as we organise ourselves, I have to say one of the biggest concerns to us as a panel is whether we're going to effectively manage to organise ourselves on the panel. We've managed to do that successfully, so it can only get better from here. So that's fantastic. I'm Charlotte Marquet. I'm a non-executive director of the Trust. I've been here since 2016, and I'm really, really pleased to be facilitating this conversation. Prevention and early intervention, it's not surprising that our community think it's one of the most critical things that we really need to focus on. It's really important that we identify and focus our efforts in trying to minimise the prevalence and incidence of poor mental health and severity and impact on people's lives. It's an undertaking that involves all of us. We've talked about the work we're doing in the community, we've talked about our staff, we've talked about our patients, we've talked about carers, we've talked about us as an organisation. It's a collective undertaking. We need to think about effective ways that we can ensure that we can all look after our own health and support others to do so, and ensure that when people want to access our service, they can do so, early enough and are supported if they have a long-term health condition. So, we all have a role to play. We've talked about the fact that the extension of us as an organisation is, extending into the community. We've got parks, we're connecting, we're closer to schools. We've got a really good relationship with voluntary sector organisations and social services, and it's going to be that collective endeavour that's going to really help us to think about how we can make progress. So the basis of this 30-minute conversation is really about the various different perspectives on, how we might progress our work on prevention and early intervention. So I'm really pleased to introduce our panel members. We have Jadine Campbell, who's a lived experience mentor within the Trust. So welcome, and thank you very much for being here today. We have Dr. Natalie Daly, who is a public health consultant from Richmond and Wandsworth Council. Welcome. We have Dr. Victoria Hill, one of our clinical directors here in Adult Community Services. And last but not least, we have Tom Coffey, who's the local GP and Senior Health Policy Advisor to the Mayor of London. So welcome and thank you very much, all of you, for participating in this conversation. We're going to have a conversation amongst ourselves. I hope it's really fruitful. There will be an opportunity to maybe ask executives or any questions that fall out of this particular conversation. Okay, so I'm going to start with you, JD. So my first question really is to really understand the role of service users and the voluntary sector in shaping better early support. What do you think the role is?
I guess I would say the role is it starts with sitting here, if it makes sense. And I've heard a lot about the community and Black and Asian ethnic people from different backgrounds. It's about educating people as well. It's not really happening in camps, but I do think that's where we really need to hone in, because when we're educating younger people about mental health, about self-care, what it looks like, you know, and how it can help them in life, I think it starts there. So I'd say in education, I also think that with myself, I've been involved with the involvement team as a lived experience member at different levels and had opportunities to collaborate with the professionals on various projects, on collaborating with the home treatment team, on looking at how, you know, they want to make their service better. So we've done questionnaires, we've done leaflets, we've done some patient safety stuff. There's been a lot, and I think I'd like more people like me to become a part of every level, to be able to collaborate on different things. I think we need to thank our volunteers, as I think we rely on them quite a lot, but they're really important part in prevention and early intervention. Yeah, I think the role of the service user being listened to is also where it starts for professionals, because if you're not listening, we're not going to get very far, are we? So we all need to be listening at every level. I can say it's nice to be sitting with some clinical directors, because we talk about community. My experience in the community, I want everyone to have that same experience with their GPs in particular. You know, being able to have a conversation with your GP about your mental health, that's where it starts. There's so many people who don't want to go to the GP who have mental health problems, serious mental illnesses. There's a lot of pairs out there, and I feel like as pairs, with experienced members and volunteers, we can start trying to break down some of those barriers that exist in the community, especially, you know, for Asian and Black cultures. It still exists, very much so. When I first entered services, I was scared to come into service, because I was thinking, I'm not business. I'm not going to be able to sit in front of this lady. What do I actually walk back through the door? What is the exception of being on the because I'm not this natural woman who's dealing with stuff. But it was through the support of my recovery team and through the support of the involvement team, I felt heard and I felt listened to, especially when I had some issues on my mental health. I really felt listened to, and I think that was really important. It wasn't just like a tick box. I really felt heard, and I feel like the work and the projects that I'm doing done is amazing. I think it's not just a tick box. Otherwise, I'm not sure we can sit here but I really truly do believe in it. And I just also want to thank the USAC committee as well, on inviting me to sit on the committee. It's amazing to see the work that you all do as well.
JD, we're definitely. Thank you very much for that, JD. I heard quite a lot of things there in terms of the importance of really connecting with your community as a really important starting point, listening and hearing what the community says about what the community needs, educating. And I saw education in terms of not just within the community. We talked about young people, but also, I guess, you know, as practitioners, we also need to ensure that we're educated and we have that sort of shared understanding of what early support and prevention looks like. I heard you talk about the importance of engaging with clinicians and our GPs as an important first port of call, and also the validation you get from being involved in decision-making platforms as well, and really feeling that, you know, your lived experience can make a difference to our decision-making. So thank you very much for that. We're going to build on that bit of that conversation as we progress, but, you know, as our other colleagues make contributions, and please feel free to sort of, you know, give your reflections as we go through. So I'm going to move us along to Natalie from a public health perspective, and ask, you know, what is the role of reducing stigma in the prevention and identification of mental ill health? What's the role of reducing stigma?
So I think we've heard stigma mentioned a few times through the evening. And we know that it can make it difficult for people to recognise signs and symptoms of mental ill health in themselves, and it can also act as a barrier to people going to seek the help and the treatment that they need. So tackling this plays a really crucial role in making sure that people are seen early or preventing mental ill health. You know, that stigma often arises from a lack of understanding, from fear. And I think we've all seen, you know, in the media sometimes there are inaccurate representations of mental illness and inappropriate use of language as well. And everyone has seen examples of those things, and all of that contributes. And people often feel scared because they don't know how they're going to be received if they go and try and seek help. They don't know if their livelihood is going to be threatened, for example. Stigma can come from the public generally towards people with mental illness. It can come from the person themselves as well, who's experiencing mental health. There is that self-stigma as well, and it can come from institutions. You know, we've spoken about some of these issues that exist within institutions. We know that there are policies and practices that discriminate against people with mental illness, whether that's consciously or unconsciously. We also know that within some ethnic minority communities, levels of stigma around mental health are very, very high. And that can stop it being recognised. It can sometimes mean that it's not even talked about within particular communities. And that means that people can have challenges in recognising mental illness within themselves. You know, we did a piece of work in Wandsworth, an annual Director of Public Health report, Enough is Enough, which is about the mental health experiences of ethnic minorities in Wandsworth. And there's a quote in there from someone from the Black African community. He talks about how their mental health challenges are not recognised within their family. There was a lot of embarrassment, there was a lot of shame, they didn't want to talk about it. And as such, that person was then not getting the support that they needed. And we know that if the stigma can stop people from seeking help at an early point of need. And then they're more likely to first encounter services when they're in crisis, which is clearly not where we want anyone to be. In terms of tackling that, there's, you know, mental health first aid is one initiative that I think a lot of people in the room will have heard about, and it teaches people to understand and identify and respond to signs and symptoms of poor mental health and challenge some of these myths and conceptions
that have developed and commissioned that enrichment on one's work for people who live and work in the boroughs. But also improving mental health literacy is important, and that includes knowledge and belief around mental disorders that support recognising them, managing them and preventing them. And part of the work that we're doing is developing a public mental health strategy, which is focusing on early intervention and prevention. And one of the key principles within that is tackling stigma.
So really, you get used to this. Yeah, and it's really interesting. A lot of the things that you talked about, I mean, I think you really set out some of what we understand are some of the causes around stigma and how we might reduce it. And I was just reflecting back on what you said, Jodine, about the importance of education at all levels within the community, from young people all the way through, and the importance of listening. So we'd be interested to know, maybe as we progress the conversation, to go through questions, you know, how are we, you know, communities are asset rich, you know, how are we utilising what's already within the community and listening to some of their perspective about how we might tackle some of these things and incorporating it in our intervention. So I think as I go through, we get to the end of the questions and maybe have a discussion about how we integrate some of these reflections that we're having, if that's okay. We'll have time for that, won't we? Yeah. Use my mic.
Often you pass your mic down, sorry, this other one's not.
Okay. So thank you very much for that, Natalie. I think we'll progress that bit of the conversation as we go along. So my next question is for you, Victoria. It's so why are partnerships so important in making early intervention and preventative care work? So, thank you. So gosh, we've talked about partnerships a lot today, haven't we? And they are incredibly important. But I wanted to talk particularly about sort of prevention and early intervention, because I think that we still have a long way to go. But I guess from my perspective, the most important reason why is because mental health and mental illness is multifactorial. It's a system approach, and you need a population health approach to actually address it. Not one organisation, not one place has all the answers. They aren't able to provide all of that in one place. We need a whole system approach around, and it requires partnerships, but it also requires partnerships that work in a very joined up way. And I think that's the work that we are still continuing to do. I've been in mental health for a very long time. I've been in this trust for 25 years. And I haven't got my badge. I guess from my perspective, what I thought that mental health was quite good at working in partnership, because it was that sort of multifactorial. But I think what we've learned is actually we've still got a long way to still go, particularly around prevention. And I think, you know, we've got social determinants of mental health or mental illness. We've got lifestyle determinants. We've got, and it's really important that we wrap around our services around individuals and not around organisations. So I think it's really important for intervention, early intervention, prevention. I think the advantages of partnership working, I think probably everybody knows this, but I will reiterate it anyway, that it means that many different parts of the system can join up to provide holistic services. So we know that we need services to help people in so welfare benefits, housing, education. We've mentioned all these before. Physical health, really important, a determinant as well of mental health outcomes. Better decision making about what services are required and needed. And I wanted to go back to what Jodine was saying about the importance of the service user and voluntary sector voices, because they have the knowledge. You know, that's the issue. They have the knowledge, they've been through this. And so they will be able to tell, you know, themselves will be able to tell us what is actually needed in order to prevent ill health or to intervene in a much earlier way. So, and that's why in community services and part of the transformation, there's been quite a significant investment in peer support in order to provide
that support earlier on. Because it isn't easy to perhaps go home to the GP, and it isn't always easy to access some of the sort of services that have been set up in a sort of mainstream way. So that's part of one of the things that we've done in Community Transformation. So I think it's also about sustaining the future of services in this joined up way, and we've talked about addressing the inequalities as well. So and just improving the safety and experience for our users, our carers, our families, and our communities.
So thank you. We're going to definitely progress the conversation around partners, I guess, because I guess there's also something about the different agencies different partners have. You know, we talked about the importance of service users and communities having a vested voice, and we need to make sure the agency, I guess, is, you know, there's a parity when we come together as a partnership, that we really do maximise the assets within our community. So it's really good to hear that that's a critical part of our community transformation approach. So thank you very much for that. Going to move along to Tom, who's been waiting very patiently. So my question, and I will come back to another question for you actually, Victoria, in terms of community transformation, but in terms of lessons learned, we'll pick up a bit later. So Tom, we've talked a lot about health inequalities, and we talked about the amount of work that needs to be done in order to tackle health inequalities. You know, there's a lot to do. And what are the mental health inequalities when it comes to prevention and early support? You know, what are those health inequalities, and how might we tackle them at the level of primary care? I mean, Jadine's already talked about the importance of the first connection with a patient and the local GP.
Thank you very much. So I've been a GP in Wandsworth for 31 years, so I'm sure some of them can beat that in a second. But first of all, what I'm about to say on behalf of all our local GPs, to say thank you to all the trust staff who are here today, because the amount of work you do, you go beyond your duty, and although sometimes the waiting times are too long, but the quality of care, the quality of the interface between you and your patients is fantastic. And yeah, I feel very lucky to be, you know, working in this area and benefiting from your services. So big thank you. I suppose for me, inequalities and trying to address inequalities is about partnership, innovation, and just being practical. And I'm listening to Jadine and really asking your patients what they think works, because they normally know what works and they also know what doesn't work. So what I'd like to do is give you kind of 3 examples of where trying to put those principles into practice and actually can try to address the inequalities. The first inequality I'd like to talk about is poverty. That those in poverty are much more likely to get poor mental health, and those with poor mental health are more likely to live in poverty. And so our local food banks came to see myself and a few others and said, you know, we're getting so many patients in despair financially, but also in despair mentally. So we approached your Talk Wandsworth service, Yvonne Hemmings, I'm pushing up here today. I said, Yvonne, what can we do about that? I said, okay, then let me get some Talk Wandsworth staff and we'll place them in all the different food banks. And that is just working fantastically. So all of a sudden, you were getting a support near where the patients are and near where the staff, you know, can make a difference. The second area, I suppose, is about ethnicity. The access, the experience, and the outcomes for our BME community in Wandsworth is much poorer for mental health. And we think, how do we address that? And again, it's working in partnership and using some of the services that might be your Cinderella services. So you've got a family therapy service, very small service. It's always in the corner of the plot somewhere. And they work with our local organisation, Alex here, for the Wandsworth Community Empowerment Network, to start a programme of training our local, first it was imams and then Black majority church leaders, and then local other church leaders, working with our community to say, how do we give you the skills and the training and the confidence to identify early on poor mental health in your community and how to refer it into the service. So this is, again, a practical example of making a difference. The third one is, if you've got a severe enduring mental health problem, you're likely to die 20 years earlier than the average punter in Wandsworth. And that, in fact, isn't because of your mental health alone. It's often with the coexisting poor physical health, principally heart disease and strokes and diabetes. And we try to work out, why don't people with schizophrenia, etc., go to the gym, go to the GP referral services? It's because they're not designed for them. They're designed for the active, motivated, middle-class person in Wandsworth who can go to the gym class at 8:30 on a Saturday morning. So we were very lucky that we worked with our CMHT colleagues and a local organisation called Enable. Now, Enable are your local gym providers. And they said, you know, what we've found is that we've got these great personal trainers who go and work with people like me early in the morning and when I come home at night, but in the daytime, they're underemployed. We found 5 or 6 personal trainers and said, if we pay you, can you work with our schizophrenic patients and our people with severe mental illness, give them 12 one-to-one sessions, referred by the CMHTs into this service. And this has been an amazing success. You're getting people losing weight, blood pressure's lowering, their mental health is improving. The DNA rate is 1.3%. You will not get a much better DNA rate in any other service. They do knock at their door, so it makes a bit of a difference, makes it a bit easier. But it's about bespoking a service to the needs of your patient, making sure you've got an exit strategy. So what I'm trying to show you very quickly just then, it's about partnership. Listen to your patients, be practical, do things which people say will make a difference here and now, and listen to your patients. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. I don't even need to do a summary. You've done a nice summary for yourself. Thanks for that one. I'm going to invite you back again. That's fabulous. So, I mean, we've got some time. Yeah, we've got some time. Timekeepers there. We've got about 10 minutes. It'd be really nice for us to have a bit more of an integrated conversation. But I think the conversation wouldn't be complete for me without also drawing my attention. So I'll just be mindful of sort of Billy talked about health inequalities and the fact that they've been here for a long time. And I think we're becoming much more confident about acknowledging that there are institutional structural elements that we also need to address. So I think that's also been part of our journey as a trust in our own understanding of how we move things forward. So it's always important to be mindful of those, and those are not trust specific, those are about the issues that we're experiencing through the wider systems, you know, and the challenges that particular communities have accessing systems which are institutional and they're structural and they're systemic. So, you know, that's how I think we've progressed our conversation somewhat. So I just was reflecting on what all parties have said. You know, we talked about, started with the importance of listening to our population, and for me there's also something about giving agency to that listening as well. You know, if we give it some, you know, it's got to have some significance, it's got to have an impact, it's got to have a space and a place. And you talk about the importance of being on QSAP, for example, so a decision-making platform where, you know, listening became significant, and we have to think about how we continue to do that. Talk about education, and I think that we know we're not only an institution that can teach, we can also learn. And if we make sure that education is two-way, then I think we're some way to, you know, really understanding how we can prevent and how we can engage people early on. We've talked about the importance of partnerships as well, and I do have a bit of a question about the community, what we're learning from the community transformation work, which is really important to bring into the conversation. And you talked about the stigma, and in fact we've really got to build that trust. I think Billy talked about, if we're going to try to really tackle stigma within particular communities, you know, and give people confidence to use our services. So if I start with maybe yourself, Victoria, give some examples of what we've learned, and then if anybody wants to come from a patient perspective or public health or want to interject, then please do.
Sure, I just actually did want to pick up on the agency aspect of the partnership working, because I think that's one of the lessons that we have learned from community transformation. We started the design process around community transformation through COVID, which seems a long time ago now. And I think what we were really clear about is that partnerships have to be right at the beginning. They have to be. That's one of the lessons we've learned, is that it's not just okay to listen to people. They have to be involved in the decision making right from the beginning. So we had a lot of work around trying to ensure that our, you know, people that were involved. And I think we've learned lessons over the time. I think we're getting better at it. I wouldn't say that we got it right all of the time, but I think it's about how we not just listen to our communities, but how our communities can influence the decisions that are made for our service provision. I think that's one of the big lessons that I think we learned from community transformation in the process of it. Obviously, in terms of what we wanted to do to ensure sort of prevention, early intervention, which is a big thrust of community transformation, was to think about how we could get the right people in at the right time to be engaged with our patients and carers. So one of the big thrusts and learning points was around ensuring we had a really good peer support network to provide that early on. And so all of the sort of systems that we're trying to think about is actually early access, reducing those barriers to access, which do exist and have actually played into our health inequalities, of course. So that's been a big thrust. I'm not going to say we've got it absolutely sorted. We are working through it. We're working through. We're on to the next boroughs of Wandsworth and Merton. And I'm hoping that we're doing a little bit better in really engaging all our partners. And I'm looking to Malik, who's a big player in this as well, in terms of how we make sure that the communities stay at the centre of what we're trying to deliver. I think for me personally, in terms of what we've learned, we need culture change. There's a big culture change piece here. I think for us, it's about breaking those organisational barriers. You need system leaders, system thinking leaders, and you need a lot of energy and commitment and drive. Got to keep going with this, ensuring that we don't stop short of what we're doing. I think that's been sort of more of the high level lessons. We've made some really fantastic partnerships in community transformation. So I just wanted to sort of name a few because name dropping a few of these. So obviously we have been working in partnership with MHIP for Wandsworth, which is still in progress. Our pilot site, that's now not a pilot anymore, but business as usual, is Sutton, and we made some fantastic partnerships there with the Sutton Mental Health Foundation, Sutton Carers Centre, Off the Record, and Age UK Sutton. So we had some fantastic. We've also commissioned welfare advice support, so which is ring fenced for people who have more chronic and severe mental health problems, knowing that obviously sort of social aspects is really important to help with improving our services and preventative work. And I guess also are quite integrated now, our IPS, which is our employment support for people, because obviously that is incredibly important. And they're very, very embedded now in our services. And I think that I think we've just had a quite good inspection on how well they're doing. So, and that's going to be expanding to people coming from primary care. So we're expanding the access to our employment specialists. So I think, we're getting there. We're really getting there. But I think it's that you've got to keep going. The energy's got to keep going, and commitment.
I really appreciate that, and it's not to underplay, how challenging it is. And when I think about it, I always think about, somebody with an umbrella going into a headwind. You've got to be really determined, because that headwind of all the challenges and the anxious are come against you, and we're very mindful. That there is that, and really appreciate, the leadership that drive, moves it forward, because it is something that's important. Are there any other thoughts that people wanted to sort of reflect on in terms of the wider conversation? Any additional points from any perspective? Yeah, can I pass to you? It's my done, right? Health and safety issue.
I just wanted to say that when I mentioned about education and it being for the young people, it's also for our older people. My dad is 87 years old, and he first learned I had a mental health problem 3 years ago. I've had a mental health problem for a long time. I was just masking in front of them. And when I told him, he was really in shock. And he was like, yeah, but he had this perception of mental health. You know, somebody walking down the street speaking. I was like, no, Dad. I said, you've got so much to learn. And you know what? He wanted to learn, and he has learned. And he takes it upon himself to read certain things and even pass on information. And he's 87, and he's from the Black community. You know, somebody I would never wanted to tell, but I did, and I'm glad I did, because we learn from each other. And despite his age, he's growing, and he's, you know, when he visits his GP, he has this knowledge that he might be feeling anxious maybe, and being able to some stuff on how he feels, and thinking maybe I've had anxiety all this time and I just didn't know, you know. So I think, you know, it goes both ways. And as for myself, being in my community, I'm gonna coach other people like myself who, you know, go masked and you don't see, you know. And I think that by coaching others and empowering others, I think more people, you know, will feel confident enough to say what they feel, and also feel like they have a voice and be listened to as well. And in regards to physical health and mental health, I think there's a big situation there. I've had some experiences, and I know that mental health and physical health go hand in hand. It is so key, and it is a struggle. And I feel in my other hat that I play in the community, working alongside the GPs, trying to get people with serious mental health issues to actually get their annual health checks. I think we need to kind of like raise the profile on that as well, because that's huge. So I just wanted to say that.
I think we're about to wrap up, but I think you just give us a perfect way to do so. You give us a really positive reflection about the assets that are within our communities, and also things don't stay stagnant. You know, you had a really important point about the fact that maybe 10, 20 years ago it might have been you rather have that perception, but you know, in current day time, you know, he's got a different view on it. So we have to really think where communities are at. That's a really positive thing. And the call to action about the annual health checks, just reiterating that out there. But thank you very, very much, my panel, for that really interesting conversation. I'd like to thank everybody for their contribution. And I'm now going to hand over to Anne seamlessly.
Thank you very much, Shola, and to Tom, Victoria, Jadine and Natalie for what I hope you think was a really stimulating, rich discussion, and particular well done to Jadine's dad. I think that was a great story. So we're now moving on to the second Q&A session of this evening, where you can ask questions from the floor, and I have a list of experts who allegedly will ask them. But what I might do is take a couple, 2 or 3 questions, give the experts time to get their act together. So, who would like to ask a question? We do have a roving mic. So, a lady in the middle here, and then a gentleman behind, and then a lady there. So, if we take those 3. And then we'll ask for more questions. So over to you.
Okay, I just want to thank the panelists first. I think the contributions have been quite insightful. Overall, we see poorer outcomes in the Bay community when it comes to the support and the access, you know, they need when it comes to the mental health. I just wanted to ask, what is the social responsibility or contribution that South West London and St. George's NHS Trust is working towards when it comes to, like I say, that we're doing a lot with the community. But for example, if someone sees within themselves that, you know, it might be that they've got some mental health challenge, what do they do? Because I think Dr. Anthony was talking about stigma, and I think it's one of the things that the BIM community struggles with, because you're at risk of losing your job, you're at risk of being seen in a certain way. All these perceptions are out there. But if we know that, we can approach this in a non-judgmental way, a lot of people within the BIM community will be more open to that support. So I just wanted to know in terms of awareness, because we might think that everybody knows what to do when it comes to talking about their mental health, but they might not know. It might just be, I don't have the statistics, but just, a set number of people. So what is the trust? I'm just asking about the trust. What are we doing to tackling that and creating that awareness in the community?
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to probably give that question to Billy, but others may want to chip in as well. But if we could take the question behind, I'm not going to go to Billy yet. I'm going to go to, sorry, Angus. I'm making you get your steps in. Right, so we'll take the next two questions and then we'll get the answers. If you could say who you are, it would be helpful. Thank you.
I'm Peter McCanny. I'm the member for Health and Adult Social Care in Burton, and I can raise Tom's 31 years. I'll
see you somebody would.
31 years and raise it 6. I've been a councillor for 37 years.
Congratulations.
I want to make a comment, because Tom actually paid a compliment to the trust. I would like to join in that. We really value and appreciate the work that you all do, your staff and your leadership team. And Vanessa said something about irritating us at places. She doesn't irritate me. She actually reminds me that it's important that we take mental health seriously. But also, she makes a huge contribution. In addition to running this organisation, she makes a huge contribution to this place and community, and we are very grateful. Not irritated at something. The question is, it's probably for Philip, and nobody will ask Philip a question.
You'd be surprised.
It's just, sorry, I'm getting that right. In his slide, and I'm not talking to the microphone. In one of his slides, he talked about break even or better before impairments. Now, as somebody who's always concerned about budgets and making sure that we break even, I'd love him to explain what impairments are, because I always thought impairments is something that hindered you, but it seems that down here it can help you to break even.
They're a technical thing. I might have to leave that question to the end, otherwise Philip could use up all the time giving you a very long answer, but we'll come to Philip.
But there is one other point. It's important.
And your report, yes.
We talked about affordable housing, and I'm putting affordable housing in inverted commas, because the question is, could one of your nurses afford affordable housing? Because it means different things to different people, particularly property developers. And if you are having problems with recruitment and retention, then that's a huge area that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. So I'll get Philip on the impairments, and I'll probably come to Ian on the affordable housing. So if we take this question here, Angus, I'm confusing you, aren't you? And then I will go to the answers. You can say who you are, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Sophie Fichma, and I represent Mind and their peer support. They deliver peer support in the community of Kingston for people with mental health issues. The question is about the whole treatment team, how they are going to get further training to, we can say, reach some kind of standard of understanding with the people they deal with. I believe the the way of questioning and also specifically the kind of questions that they should ask the patients should be changed radically. For example, from how many times have you eaten today? How many hours did you sleep today? How many times have you think about killing yourself today? Those standard questions that don't actually give a level of well-being of the person in question. Why don't we ask what made you feel better or worse from yesterday, for example? What do you think are your needs and your priorities for your recovery, or even what also? Yes, which coping strategies have you put in place to keep your routine and your well-being? This was the question. If is it clear enough?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm looking at Amy for that one, but it might be that others want to chip in as well on that. So let's start with Billy, which is about what's our responsibility and going back to the health inequalities.
You might want to
have a go at that one as well, yeah.
So that, the assessment one.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question about stigma and helping to make our services more accessible. I really believe that stigma is tackled one conversation at a time. And so it is, yes, we've got the strategic bits of work that we're doing, right? But by recruiting people with the right values, changing how what our staff group is made up of, promoting more Black, Asian, minority ethnic people into more senior positions within the organisation, and we're making the organisation more representative of our community at large. And you heard what Jadine was saying, and she was doing some educating on our behalf with her dad, right? So if we keep making a difference with making our services more accessible for Black, Asian and minority ethnic people, they'll become our ambassadors as well. And if people are recovering, they talk to their brothers and sisters, who talk to their friends and family, etc. This will change things one conversation at a time. So yeah, we've got a strategic priority, we've got pages facing the bus stop. But it's about our staff and the conversations that we have with our community, I would say. But it's absolutely our responsibility to tackle stigma, and that's a space that we want to be active in. And then just on assessment, I completely agree that we need to be flexible and dynamic and patient-centered in the way that we ask our questions, right? So one of the reasons I still love doing clinical practice is because I get to meet all sorts of different types of people with different lives, different challenges, right? So I can't go through a series of formulas in order to get to the answer. And it's also not going to build trust, right? So that whole point that we were saying that we need to build trust with our communities, I always see that as my first responsibility as a psychiatrist. So yeah, having some structure is important, and we're introducing tools within our care planning work that Sharon was telling you about, having holistic care, where we're going to use a tool that you might have heard of called the dialogue tool that helps to, it's got 11 areas where we ask about people's preferences around work and medication and relationships and things. So it provides a structure. But we can't just ask a series of 11 questions. It's about putting the patient at the centre of it. So yeah, I don't want to hear people going through a list, and we need to be flexible and patient-centred.
Was just about focusing on positive aspects of the because instead of focusing just on the negative aspects.
Absolutely, yeah. And so that dialogue tool that I was telling you about helps to identify the areas that patients want to build into their recovery plans. But then the next step is to talk about that. What does one step forward look like? And completely agree.
Thank you. I think Philip, you're on explaining in 1 minute impairments.
Well, I'll keep it simple. So in basic terms, on everyone's balance sheet or every company's balance sheet, we hold assets at a certain value. And in our case, at the end of each financial year, we have to have them revalued, normally by the district valuer. Where that valuation is less than the amount that you already hold that, so let's say we hold it at £1.5 million and the district valuer says it's only worth £1 million, that generates what would be known as an impairment of £500,000. Where that impairment was generated by reasons outside of the trust's control, so in that case, market movement that we can't possibly influence, that £500,000 in my example is discounted from our results. So it still appears in our profit and loss account, and you will see a loss of about £3 million. But the Department of Health and the Treasury, when they take into account reckonable spend, then disallow that £500,000 in my example, it's £3 million in our accounts. And therefore, it brings us back to a break even in terms of how we perform, in terms of what we can control.
Don't get him started on revaluation reserves, because we could be here all night. Ian, did you want to say anything about affordable housing and how affordable is it really?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, there are three parts to my answer. The homes that we're building currently on the site, the affordable, there are 20% of the 850 homes. They're coming forward as affordable. Affordable is a definition that's laid down by the London Borough of Wandsworth in this instance, and they also control the definition of who's the key worker within the borough and set the limits and set also what the thresholds for any subsidies that go with that, which is means testing to salaries. The important part of it, we're just about to bring forward an application on what we call Plots XYZ, which are the area down towards Stretton Cemetery, where whilst the existing one is on 2012 basic rules, that one on today's rules means that of those 450 homes, if we get permission for it, 50% of them will be affordable. And really importantly, the 50% of that 220, 110 of them will be what they call affordable rents. Okay, so that's the nearest to council house, what we used to know as council house rent levels. That makes it the most affordable part of the affordable section. The other definitions, by the way, in affordable are shared equity and also a social register, social landlord areas, as well as buy-to-let. So there are three elements where we know we can do better than what we have now. The application we have in will make us the only scheme in London actually that's hitting a policy compliant level for the affordable level of houses, and most importantly, affordable rent.
Thank you. So I'm looking this way now. We'll probably take another couple of questions. There's Malik and then Martin and then Suresh, and then we might run out of time, but
thank you, and Malik, Director of the Wandsworth Community Empowerment Network and convener of the Eminent Project across South London. Can we very quickly address what appears to be a contradiction between the rhetoric of race disparities and housing inequalities and the actual practice of it? I'd like to say it was a brilliant panel, and I really enjoyed the discussions that were held with them. And the three things I often frame this conversation around is follow the money, follow the evidence, and emerge the system. Now, if you look at the evidence, when Amy gave her slide about engagement, spoke to 1,000 people, 8 squares she's put up. 7 of those squares, the solutions are all in communities. The solutions are found in communities. And if you look at the data, we won't talk about data here because I think we all know the data, the Core 20 data, the race inequality data. If you then follow the money and look at how much money is actually going into housing inequalities and race disparities, we've talked all evening about the EMIT program, and I'm very proud of the trust and the work that Vanessa and Vicky have done about, and the board. And I want to acknowledge Shola and the work that she's done there. Less than 0.1%. Let me say that again. Less than 0.1% of the ICB budget is going towards tackling race disparities. And even if you just look at the trust resources, it's less than 1%. So the rhetoric of anti-racism and the rhetoric of health inequalities, if you ask Natalie Daly about her public health budget, and if you ask Jane Thorpe of her health inequalities budget in the ICB, it is minuscule compared to the data
And finally, in terms of emerge the system, in Wandsworth and Wandsworth alone, we have over 500 voluntary and community sector organizations, much more around 700, 800. We have over 250 faith groups, 60 of those are Black-led churches. We have 8 significant mosques. We have thousands of active community groups and networks and associations. We are probably only engaging with about 5% of them. So when aiming strategy about prevention and recognizing it's all in communities, we're actually not talking to any communities at all. We're talking to this nebulous notion of a voluntary sector, which is a kind of self-protecting and self-financing sector of very, very small groups of very, very well-resourced organizations, majority. So therefore, there's a contradiction in all those things in terms of data, finance, and systems between the rhetoric and the practice.
Thank you. I'll come to Vanessa to address that, but I'm going to pick up Martin and Suresh's questions. And then I saw Kathy, and there was one over there, and then we probably will have to stop if people want to get away on time. So Angus is coming running. No, Angus, Martin. I'm keeping you on your toes because I'm keeping your step count up. Right, Martin.
Thank you. I'm Martin Haddon. I'm a volunteer at Health Watch Wandsworth. And I want to ask a question about the crisis pathway. Health Watch Wandsworth is very much aware that there is a lot of concern at the moment about the crisis pathway and the trust response to the crisis. There has been an announcement of a new policy called Right to Care, Right to Person, and a lot has been made about the intention of the police to change their role and withdraw to some extent from mental health functions. But this is causing quite a lot of anxiety and concern, and people are getting confused and misleading messages from a trust crisis now. I know because I attend various committees that there is an action plan, but I also see that the action plan is written in very much kind of service jargon speak, which most people wouldn't understand. And I'm concerned that the action plan, I can't see any sign that it's been produced or has had significant elements of the involvement of service users or carers of the community. And I'm particularly concerned to know when some kind of public statement will be made that people can understand where they should go and where they can get help when there's a crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I'm going to hand that one to Jen in a minute. Suresh.
Thank you, and I'm conscious of the time, so I'll be very quick. It's 7:30 nearly. Very quickly. I mean, I'm glad well, first and foremost, I can go over the 36 years. I'm 31. I have 36 years here and 51st year in the NHS. 5-1. So thank you. I thought I would brag about myself. Very quickly. The question from Vanessa, especially with regards to the number of beds. I see we've got 369 beds now in trust. That is the figure I've picked from the booklet. So the question is, I know there's still a crisis around London and around here, but are we still sending patients away, miles away, or in the nearby bed and breakfast or the hotels, or have we got enough beds? That's the very first question. The second one, I'm glad the point about the affordable housing has been picked up, and because when I was reading it wrongly, then it's affordable housing. There aren't any here at the moment, but I'm glad there will be. And finally, very quick point. please, I've said this before, and I'll say it again to the trust. Recruitment retention in the trust is an issue. We have removed our houses, staff accommodation at all, but we have removed them here. An opportunity lost here to bring more for our own property for the recruitment retention, 10 houses, 10 flats. Now we still got an opportunity at the Shaftesbury place where when it is built. So can we please reconsider it? Thank you.
That last one is probably one for Ian to have a go at. So, Vanessa, the mismatch between the words and where we spend our money in relation to health inequalities.
Thank you, Alec, as always, for your challenge to the system. And so when I put up my first slide, and when I was speaking, health inequalities and our commitment to health inequalities runs through everything that we do, and through every service that we make, and through all of the investments that we make into those services. So I understand your point around the investment in NHIP itself as an individual standalone programme, which is predominantly what we're talking about here. But actually, through the community transformations that we're running, we're making huge investment into health inequalities in the way in which we deliver our services. And that's shown through the work that we've done in our talking therapy services and improving the access rates to bring that in line for people from Black and ethnic groups, minority communities with white populations. So I understand the point that we need to invest more. But I honestly believe that the commitment of the organisation to behave and act differently means that the commitment of the total mental health spend is on addressing health inequalities in everything that we do. And we might not always get it right, but we're making significant steps, and our evidence shows that. And as you know, the Trust has been the biggest supporter for shouting loud about health inequalities, not just for mental health, but for physical health. And as long as myself and Anne and the board are here, that will continue. So we'll continue to grow that together. And to talk to Suresh's question around, have we got enough beds? If I invest in more beds, I take away from the community, because I can't provide much care into the community itself. If I don't invest in more beds, people in acute mental health crisis, to talk to Martin's point, wait in the wrong part of the system. But we have to have enough faith and commitment to adjusting where we put our resources. So the work that Victoria was speaking about into our community services is around addressing the balance, so less people enter acute mental health crisis, so a disproportionate number of people, again, from Black and ethnic minority communities are having to access inpatient care, get care earlier into the community services. So if we carry on as we currently are, we won't have enough beds. But if we can continue to make the positive changes that we are doing, like the work in Sutton, in community, there is less access to inpatient beds needed. So we are shifting the dial on it, and we are spot purchasing less beds than we were, and the beds that we are using in the private sector are closer to home and actually within our boroughs at the moment. Not 100% of the time, but the majority of the time. But does it cause me worry at night around our acute service? It does. But I wouldn't be honest in my job if it didn't.
Thank you, Vanessa. Jen's going to talk about the crisis service.
Thanks, yeah. Thanks for the question, Martin. I know Right Care, Right Person has been quite a big deal over recent months. And it's interesting, I never heard of the programme 6 months ago, but now I know quite a lot about it. So I've been quite closely involved in the work. So the most important thing I think to say to begin with is that nothing has changed in the response that people should expect from mental health services and the police here and now. And that needs to put the person at the centre of the care, and will continue to do so. We are very happy to respond to any concerns about any specific services, but nothing has changed about our services and about the response that we will give people in mental health crisis. We have been working really closely with the Met Police across the London Mental Health Trust and with local authorities also to work through how we work together in partnership to implement the principles of the Right Care, Right Person programme, which is in principle very sensible. We would all support a risk-based approach to involving the police in concerns about somebody's welfare. That's a sensible approach. And we would all like to minimise the amount of time it takes to transport someone who's in crisis to a place of safety and to hand them over to the appropriate health professionals. They're sensible objectives. So it's really important that we work in partnership with the police to put a phased programme in place to make these things happen. And that will be from the autumn. And we have worked really hard at London level to adjust some of the timescales that were originally publicised and that worried everyone so much because they were very short. To answer your specific point about comms, that is about shortly to come out. Some really good partnership work has actually happened between Mental Health Trust, police and other agencies, and a consolidated kind of communication programme is literally just about to start, like Jenna and I were discussing our input to it earlier. So take totally on board, Martin, your point that to date it's been largely a sort of organisation to organisation discussion and may have been quite hard for people to interpret locally, but those communications for staff and for service users, patients and the public are about to come out. And I think it is actually really important that they're right, they're clear and they're common across all the agencies and we don't cause further confused messaging. So it's a really, really good point, but that is about to happen.
Thank you, Jen. And then Ian was going to say something about accommodation for staff opportunities.
So I think what actually Vanessa has answered something on the way through. What I would add is that in terms of providing social housing, the trust is the best place to do that. The local authority is the best place to do that. What the trust is well placed to do though is release land and provide facilities and deals to enable that social housing to come forward, which is what we're doing on the application that's currently in. So to get that 50% affordable homes on the XYZ flow, as discussed earlier, it's a really important thing to support in order to get that going forward.
Thank you, Ian. So, Kathy, and then was there one more? But Kathy, you ask your question, and then that will have to be it, I'm afraid, because we are over time.
I liked what Ruth said. I've been associated with the Friends of Barnes Hospital for about 30 years and chairman for the last 22. So there's quite a few of us golden roses around. We were delighted several years ago when the trust said that they would rebuild a health facility on the Barnes Hospital site. And this last May, even more delighted when Richmond Council gave planning permission to start building. Everyone was moved off the site down to Teddington, which is even further away from Springfield than Barnes and East Sheen is. But nothing has happened. The demolition was supposed to go on in July, rebuilding starting in August, so we could all move into the new health facility and the school could open next August in September. No demolition has yet started. None of us believe that there will be a new school and a new health facility by next September. Now, I understand that the minor condition that seems to be holding things up at the moment is that there has to be an agreement about which trees will be removed, which ones will stay, and which ones will be replaced elsewhere in the borough. And that is stopping anything starting. I want to know that what is not the management, but what is the board going to do about this? I assume you commissioned the people who are supposed to be doing all of the work around it. And you're also holding £11.1 million that the government gave you several years ago to get it going. It's not going to go as far as it would have done 5 years ago. So I want to know, what is the board going to do to get rid of get these silly conditions out of the way so we can get a really good health facility for Richmond patients and for Richmond staff?
Thank you, Kathy. I'll come to Ian in a minute. And then I was going to take the last question.
My name is Shani Kaur, and my question is that cost of living crisis and poverty was mentioned earlier. And the question is, how does the trust support the service users with the effects of these? For example, maybe maximizing their incomes. It's a short question.
It's a short one. I'm trying to think who's best placed to answer that. But let's go to Ian to update us on Barnes. And then I have a willing volunteer. Go for it.
Thank you. Hi, Kathy. Actually, the board have been pretty proactive in the last couple of weeks. So they gave me permission just last week to spend £1.5 million starting in November on the demolition works. And that's already on the back of doing the refurbs of our services safely in Teddington while we're doing the reconstruction. We're working closely with Located to resecure the contractor upon the rebuild, and we'll be starting that during the early part of 2024. But you're all right, we won't be ready for the school term of September 24. We will be ready for the school term of September 25. But healthcare services will be moving in back before then. But you will be seeing some action coming forward during November and over the course of the winter to get ourselves ready for it. So the board have been super great on letting me get on that stuff now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kathy. You've raised issues of Barnes over a number of years, haven't you? So thank you for coming tonight. So Victoria, cost of living.
I guess I've already mentioned community transformation and what we're doing to try and think about the holistic needs of our patients. And I guess what we're trying to do is actually commission and partnership working with welfare benefits and also employment support practitioners as well, because we also realise that that's a big part of the work that we need to do to enhance our patients' recovery. And also obviously stop people from relapsing. So obviously lots of work around being able to access the sorts of benefits that are required for people who are perhaps not able to work, but also get people back to work or get people back to education, because that's what they so choose. So short of not being able to give people their income, we are doing everything we can to wrap it around our service users and carers to ensure that that is a big part of their recovery plans.
Thank you, Victoria. And sadly, because we have run over by 10 minutes, I have to say, normally I don't allow, but on this occasion, given that there were still lots of questions, I thought it was important to do just that. But really, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. I hope by the time you leave, it'll have stopped raining, which will be helpful. And thank you for those who've joined us online. That's been really helpful. I thought the panel discussion was great. So thank you very much, Shola, Tom, Natalie, Jadine and Victoria. Thank you for that. That was a really stimulating conversation. Thank you to our interpreter and the volunteers who've supported us tonight. And thank you for the thoughtful questions. You know, it's sometimes uncomfortable, but actually we want you to ask us challenging questions, because that's what makes us improve. But I really want to say a special thank you, as Vanessa was saying earlier, to our extraordinary staff who every day do just amazing things in providing compassionate care to our patients and service users. And it's been said a few times, you know, without our staff, we would be nothing. We are the dedication and the integrity that they bring to work every day. I hope you've enjoyed the presentations. It's actually been quite nice to be in person again. It's always a bit odd when you're talking to a screen and you can't see anybody. You just think they're all asleep. But anyway, enjoy the rest of your evening, and thanks again for joining us.